Hi, Scorpio. Let me ask you something. What if this video didn't randomly appear on your feed, but was called here by your energy? What if you are exactly where you're meant to be, because something within you is finally ready to awaken? Welcome to Eternal Mindfulness, where astrology becomes a mirror for your spirit, and intuition becomes the key to unlocking the life you've always felt was waiting for you, just beneath the surface. If you're watching this, know this: you're not late, you're not lost, you're in sync. Even if your conscious mind can't explain it yet, your soul recognized this energy before the video even loaded. That's how the universe speaks to you, softly, symbolically, in sacred timing. And that's exactly what these next few days, from April 1st to April 3rd, are about for you, Scorpio. A shift. A subtle realignment. Not a dramatic explosion, but a powerful inner rising. Because while the world rushes to start something new, you, my dear Scorpio, are here to go deeper. To realign. To remember. To listen. This video is more than a horoscope. It's a transmission. A portal. A gentle key, unlocking the energy codes, 6 powerful numbers, that are vibrating in your field right now. Not to fix you, but to mirror back the part of you that's already whole, already powerful, already magnetic. So I invite you, right now, to slow your breath. Place a hand on your chest. And feel your energy arrive fully in this moment. You don't need to chase clarity today. You just need to allow it. And if something within you stirs as you listen, maybe a feeling in your chest, a memory, a sudden quietness, drop a comment below that says, "I'm ready to receive." That comment isn't for me, it's for you. It's your declaration to the universe that you're awake, aware, and open to what's coming next. Before we go any further, let me take a moment to thank you. I want to express my deepest gratitude for your presence here. Every like, every comment you leave, every moment you spend listening, and every subscriber who joins our journey, brings this community to life. It's because of you that we're able to bring these transformational messages forward. And trust me when I say, Scorpio, you're going to want to stay with me until the very end today. Because what the universe is revealing through your energy is nothing short of breathtaking. So now let me ask you, my loyal Scorpios. What did your soul do this week to attract this moment? What quiet intention, what bold desire, what silent whisper brought you here? Whatever it was, it worked. You're here. And everything that follows, these 6 lucky numbers, these messages, these subtle shifts, are already aligning with your energy. So stay with me. Breathe with me. This is just the beginning. There's a certain kind of transformation that doesn't make noise. It doesn't demand your attention through chaos or dramatic changes. Instead, it hums softly beneath the surface, like a river carving a new path beneath frozen earth. This is the kind of transformation the number 14 brings to Scorpio now, a quiet invitation to realign without force, to shed without struggle, to remember that your power doesn't come from speed or volume, but from the stillness you're willing to honor. Change, for you, has never been about grand gestures. Your growth happens in the quiet places, in the sacred pauses, in the unspoken moments when something deep within you simply shifts. You don't chase waves, you sense the current. And right now, that current is guiding you back to your center. Not to stop, but to pause with purpose. To become aware of what no longer fits, not out of judgment, but out of clarity. There's a wisdom in knowing when to release. We often hold on to habits, relationships, or mindsets because they've kept us safe, or because they've simply become part of our routine. But everything has a natural cycle, just like breath, just like seasons. What once supported your survival may now be the very thing standing in the way of your expansion. And that's not wrong. It just means you've grown. It means you're ready for something else. This is the subtle yet powerful energy of the number 14. It doesn't call for destruction. It calls for realignment. It asks, what are you still carrying out of habit rather than intention? In this moment, as you breathe and listen, there's space to answer that question with honesty and compassion. You don't have to force anything. You only need to notice. And in noticing, you begin to soften your grip on what's no longer needed. There's a teaching from the path of inner stillness that reminds us, when the cup is full, nothing new can be added. If you are yearning for clarity, for abundance, for joy, you must first create space. Not just in your schedule, but in your heart, in your mind, in your energy. This is why decluttering, both physically and emotionally, becomes a sacred act. You're not just clearing drawers, you're clearing pathways. You're not just organizing your home, you're preparing your spirit to receive. Try this, write down 3 things you're ready to let go of. Don't rush. Let them come to you. They might be physical objects, outdated beliefs, old narratives you've carried too long. As you name them, thank them for the protection, the comfort, the lesson. And then, gently, let them go. Even symbolically. The act of naming and releasing is enough to shift energy in your field. The card that echoes this moment is death, not an ending, but a metamorphosis. Not the closing of a door, but the unlocking of one you hadn't noticed before. This card, like the number 14, reminds you that true transformation is not about becoming someone else, it's about returning to who you've always been beneath the layers. The more you release, the clearer that essence becomes. The more you soften, the more your strength begins to radiate effortlessly. Stillness is not stagnation. It's presence. And presence is where all things begin. When you stop running toward what you think you need, and instead root into what already is, you become magnetic. That's the secret. Wealth doesn't chase chaos. It settles into calm. Success doesn't always roar in. Sometimes, it whispers. It waits. And it finds the ones who've done the inner work to hear it. So take this moment, Scorpio, not to do more, but to tune in more deeply. To feel where your body is asking for rest, where your spirit is asking for space, where your path is gently turning without force. This is the alchemy of quiet change. This is how you rise without rushing. And the moment you choose to listen, you've already begun. Sometimes, all it takes is a slight shift in awareness to realize something has already begun. You may not see the full path yet, but there's a quiet knocking, a soft hum of possibility that's been circling you. The number 3 carries the energy of gentle expansion, and in this moment, it's not asking you to leap. It's simply asking you to lean forward just enough to feel the doorframe. You don't have to step through right away. Just notice that the door is unlocked. Growth doesn't always come through bold declarations or radical reinvention. More often, it arrives quietly, layered into what's already working, waiting to be acknowledged. There's wisdom in knowing that you don't need to burn down the house to build something beautiful. You can simply add a window, let in more light, reimagine the space you're already living in. That's the spirit of the number 3. It doesn't disrupt, it deepens. It adds dimension without demanding you start from zero. Right now, there may be an idea whispering to you. A subtle urge. A flicker of, what if, that you haven't quite dared to explore. Not because you don't want to, but because something in you says it's not time, not yet, not ready. But here's the truth, readiness is rarely about preparation. It's about willingness. It's about saying yes before you have every step mapped out. Much like planting a seed, you don't wait for proof that it will grow. You trust the soil, the water, the light. You trust the process. When the mind is quiet enough, these nudges become easier to feel. They often appear in the pauses, during your morning tea, a conversation you didn't expect to linger in your thoughts, or a repeated symbol that catches your attention. This is the quiet language of alignment. Not a shout, but a suggestion. And when you respond, even with the smallest action, you open the path wider. There is a teaching that speaks of the middle way, the art of choosing what is here, without rejecting or clinging, without rushing or resisting. This middle way isn't passive, it's attentive. It asks you to meet the moment fully, to be available to possibility without the pressure of perfection. The number 3 holds that same vibration. It invites creation, not from urgency, but from a natural unfolding. It says, begin where you are, with what you have, and trust that momentum will build from presence. Think of a blank page. The hesitation you feel before writing the first word is rarely because you have nothing to say. It's the weight of expectation that holds you back. But once the pen moves, the energy begins to flow. That's the kind of courage the number 3 celebrates. Not loud. Not fearless. But consistent, intuitive, and real. The kind of courage that says, I don't have to know the ending to begin the story. If you've been waiting for a sign that it's okay to try, even if you're not sure where it will lead, this is it. Let yourself imagine what it could feel like to add one small layer to your routine, your project, your healing. A 5-minute practice. A journal entry. A phone call. A shift in language from maybe one day to I'll try today. These actions don't need to be big to be meaningful. They just need to be true. The Fool card, often misunderstood, is not naive, it's open. It represents a mind unburdened by overthinking, a spirit willing to meet the unknown not with fear, but with curiosity. And that's your invitation now. To soften into this new energy. To explore without obligation. To trust that if something keeps returning to your thoughts, it's worth your attention. So instead of asking yourself whether you're ready, ask yourself whether you're willing. Willing to see this moment as the beginning of something. Willing to take one conscious breath and let it carry you into the next step. Because sometimes, growth is not about moving faster, it's about noticing the rhythm that's already rising within you and choosing, simply, to follow it. Not every test in life comes wrapped in conflict. Sometimes, the most profound challenges come in the form of stillness. And in that stillness, without a loud disruption or a clear signpost, we're asked the quietest, yet most powerful question: do you still trust the path you chose, even when the outcome hasn't arrived? When progress slows or seems to pause entirely, the mind often jumps to conclusions. Doubt begins to creep in, whispering stories of failure or misalignment. But what if this pause isn't a setback, but a space? A carefully placed silence designed not to discourage you, but to strengthen you. The number 28 carries that energy. It's the vibration of perseverance without proof, of staying grounded not because things are happening visibly, but because you trust that what you've planted is growing, even if you can't yet see the roots. In many teachings, there is a deep reverence for the moment between moments. The space between the inhale and the exhale. The pause before a bell chimes. These in-between spaces are where presence is most alive, and where transformation quietly begins to unfold. The same is true for you now. When your relationships feel unclear, or your work feels stuck, you're not necessarily doing something wrong. You may, in fact, be in the exact space where your resilience is ripening. There's a practice in reflective living that asks us not to seek constant validation for our choices, but to return inward and ask, why did I begin this path? That simple question roots you back into your intention. It reminds you of the clarity you had at the beginning, before external pressures or temporary uncertainties clouded the view. Writing this down, journaling from that place of remembering, can bring a sense of calm and conviction that no external success ever could. Imagine you're standing at the edge of a lake at dawn. The water is perfectly still. There's no movement, no breeze. In that silence, everything becomes visible, the trees mirrored on the surface, the subtle mist rising, your own breath slowing down. This is the kind of clarity that emerges when we stop trying to stir the waters. And yet, so many of us mistake stillness for failure, or quiet for a lack of progress. But there is strength in stillness. There is progress in presence. The energy of the number 28 asks you to hold your frequency, even when the outside world doesn't reflect your inner vision, yet. It's not a punishment, it's a checkpoint. A moment to realign and recommit. Just like a tree doesn't grow taller every day you look at it, your growth doesn't need to be visible to be real. What matters is that you're tending to it. Trusting the soil. Watering the roots. And holding space for what's becoming. This moment invites a kind of inner discipline that isn't about forcing or pushing, but about returning to what you know, to what you value, to what you've already chosen. It's an act of courage to keep showing up with integrity when the rewards haven't arrived. But in doing so, you become unshakable, not because life won't try to shake you, but because your sense of self no longer depends on what's happening outside of you. The Hanged Man, a card that mirrors this phase, often appears when we're being asked to shift our perspective. It's not about rushing forward but about surrendering to the pause, allowing the moment to reorient us, not out of defeat, but out of wisdom. When we can learn to stand still with full presence, the world begins to reorganize around that calm. We begin to notice insights we missed in motion. We hear answers that couldn't be heard through noise. Let yourself be in this quiet power. Let it stretch your patience, test your trust, and ultimately strengthen your sense of purpose. You don't need the world to validate your choices in order for them to be true. The roots grow long before the branches appear. And you, dear Scorpio, are cultivating something that's meant to last. Let this space be a reminder, not of what's missing, but of what's taking shape. There are moments in life when the most powerful thing you can do is not to push forward, but to pause. To choose stillness over striving, softness over strategy. This is one of those moments. The energy of the number 6 is here not to add more to your plate, but to remind you that balance isn't something you earn, it's something you choose, breath by breath. And when you choose it, something within you begins to realign. For a sign like Scorpio, whose emotional depths and intense focus often fuel remarkable achievements, it's easy to forget that rest, too, is a form of wisdom. That's stepping back, that's saying no, that's simplifying what has become overcomplicated is not a retreat, it's a recalibration. The world may reward constant doing, but the universe responds to alignment. And in this moment, it's asking you to realign not by doing more, but by doing less with more awareness. Think of a scale, not the kind used to measure weight, but the kind used to find harmony. One side holds your ambitions, responsibilities, and the external demands you meet every day. The other holds your well-being, your presence, your inner peace. If the scale tips too far in either direction, something begins to suffer. The number 6 appears now to help you restore that inner equilibrium, not to make things even, but to make them whole. Balance doesn't always mean symmetry. It's not about having equal amounts of work and rest, or stress and peace. It's about tuning in closely enough to notice what needs more space, and what needs less. Maybe your body is craving a slower rhythm. Maybe your mind is overfull, and silence feels like the deepest form of nourishment. Or maybe your heart simply needs permission to feel without having to fix. There's a quiet strength in those who know how to listen to their own limits. Not as weaknesses to be overcome, but as signals to be honored. In the same way a river curves gently around stones instead of crashing through them, you too are invited to move with gentleness. Your pace doesn't need to match the world's. Your timing doesn't have to meet anyone else's expectations. When you give yourself the space to slow down, you often find that life meets you there, with more clarity, more ease, more flow. One of the most overlooked truths in personal growth is that expansion requires rest. Muscles don't grow during the workout, they grow during recovery. Seeds don't sprout under pressure, they sprout in quiet soil. And your vision, your path, your sense of purpose, they don't need to be forced. They need to be held with steady attention and tender care. This is why saying no right now might be the most profound affirmation of your worth. Saying no to overstimulation, to obligations that deplete, to conversations that drain. And equally, saying yes to what feels light, what feels aligned, what feels like breath. Let your yes and no be acts of devotion to your own well-being. There's a simple teaching that speaks of knowing when to put something down, not because you're giving up, but because you've carried it long enough. That teaching lives inside this number, inside this phase of your journey. And it gently asks, what weight are you still holding that no longer belongs to you? The Temperance card, often drawn in times like this, reminds us that harmony is not an accident. It's created, moment by moment, by choosing the middle path. Not too much, not too little, but just enough. It speaks of blending opposites, action with reflection, strength with gentleness, ambition with rest, into something sustainable. into a rhythm that nourishes instead of depletes. So this is your invitation, Scorpio, not to do better, but to feel better. Not to force more, but to allow what already wants to arrive. To trust that when you take care of your inner world, your outer world begins to take shape in a way that feels more natural, more abundant, and far more aligned. Let this be your season of softening, not as a step back, but as a deeper step in. Toward balance. Toward peace. Toward the kind of strength that doesn't need to be loud to be lasting. Some moments arrive without warning, yet feel like they've been circling you for a long time, waiting for just the right breath, the right silence, the right stillness within you to land. This is one of those moments. The presence of numbers 17 and 11 in your field now suggests more than just coincidence. It signals that something is aligning, and your role is not to question it, but to sense it. Not to explain it, but to follow where it leads. When life quiets down enough, your inner signals begin to surface. You start to notice things others dismiss, recurring numbers, dreams that feel more like messages than random thoughts, conversations that echo exactly what you needed to hear, or a sudden desire to revisit something you set aside long ago. These are not distractions. They're not noise. They are guidance. Intuition doesn't always speak in full sentences. Sometimes, it arrives as a pull in the chest, or a moment of calm that makes no sense but feels entirely real. You might feel drawn towards something, an idea, a place, a person, with no rational reason. And that's okay. What you're feeling isn't fiction. It's frequency. When the number 11 begins to appear in your energy field, it's often a sign that the veil between knowing and understanding is thinning. It calls for your awareness to shift, not outward, but inward, because what you're looking for might already be unfolding beneath your surface. This is not a time to look for signs outside of yourself. It's a time to notice what's already trying to rise within you. If something keeps returning to your thoughts, if a memory or idea is gently tapping at your awareness again and again, trust that it's doing so for a reason. The number 17 carries the energy of return, not as a repetition of the past, but as a refinement of something you once weren't ready to receive. Now, you might be. There's a quiet wisdom in allowing things to come back, not to take you backward, but to remind you of what still matters. In moments like this, the practice is not about chasing or forcing. It's about remembering. About allowing yourself to reconnect with a version of yourself that once dreamed with more openness, trusted with more ease, moved with less resistance. That part of you is still here. It's just been waiting for your presence to deepen again. When we talk about intuitive clarity, we often think it has to come with certainty. But true clarity isn't loud. It's not flashy. It doesn't convince you, it reassures you. It feels like peace even if it doesn't make logical sense. And that's your compass now. Whether it's a quiet yes or a subtle knowing that something must shift, your job is to trust that the signal is more important than the explanation. There's a familiar teaching that speaks to this. When water is still, it reflects clearly. When it's stirred or clouded, the reflection disappears. Your intuition is like that reflection. It doesn't need to be forced into visibility. It becomes visible when you slow down, clear the noise, and become quiet enough to see. In this sense, clarity is less about figuring things out and more about getting out of your own way. That's what the High Priestess card reminds us of. She doesn't act out of certainty, she acts out of knowing. Not because she sees every step ahead, but because she feels aligned with her next one. So when you find yourself standing at the edge of a decision you can't quite define, let your body answer before your mind catches up. If something feels gently right, follow it. Even a small step in the direction of what feels real can unlock momentum you didn't know was available. And if you're unsure whether it's intuition or fear, listen to your breath. Intuition grounds you. Fear rushes you. Intuition expands your chest. Fear tightens it. This stretch of your journey isn't asking you to justify yourself. It's inviting you to believe in yourself. Not as a performance, but as a practice. One quiet choice at a time. One deep breath at a time. One whispered yes to something you still don't have the words for, but already know is yours. Let your insight come not from needing proof, but from trusting resonance. Let your path shape itself from what returns without pressure, from what calls without shouting, from what lingers even after you try to dismiss it. Sometimes, the most powerful movement begins not with action, but with trust. And right now, that trust is the doorway. Step into it, not because you know what's next, but because something within you already does. If you've made it this far, take a deep breath with me, not just to mark the end of this journey together, but to mark a beginning within you. Because this wasn't simply a reading. This was a moment of alignment. A quiet space carved out from the noise of your day so that you could listen, not to me, but to yourself. And Scorpio, you've done exactly what was needed. You paused. You felt. You remembered. And now, you're ready. You see, the most powerful changes don't come from force, they come from presence. From being still long enough that the truth can rise to the surface on its own. And if these past few minutes have shown you anything, I hope it's this: you don't need to chase what is meant for you. You simply need to become still enough, clear enough, grounded enough for it to find you. So much of what we desire, abundance, love, opportunity, peace, has already been planted within us. The issue isn't lack. The challenge is patience. It's the discipline of not digging up the seed just because we haven't seen the sprout. And that's where your power lives right now, Scorpio. Not in doing more. Not in proving more. But in trusting that the field you've been tending is fertile, and that the bloom is closer than you think. What would it look like to give yourself permission to receive this month, rather than earn? What if your role wasn't to go out and find the right path, but to become so aligned with your values, your intuition, your truth, that the path naturally unfolds beneath your feet? Could you allow your next steps to be guided not by urgency, but by resonance? These are not just poetic thoughts. They're invitations. Small, subtle shifts that, if practiced consistently, can change the entire way you move through your life. Start by listening to the number that spoke to you most in this reading. What memory did it awaken? What feeling did it stir? And how can you respond, not by overanalyzing, but by simply saying yes to what feels right? Ask yourself, which area of your life is quietly asking for more softness? Where have you been holding too tightly out of fear? What would happen if, just for today, you released the grip and trusted that everything is unfolding, even if you don't see it yet? The truth is, your timing is divine. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not late. You are, in fact, right on time for your own transformation. These first 3 days of April are not random, they're potent. They're an opening. A sacred space for you to breathe, to shed, and to return to the version of yourself that never needed to push, only to allow. So if this video stirred something in you, leave a comment below and tell me which number spoke to you most. Say it aloud, or write it like a promise. Sparkles, I align with number ____, and I am ready to receive. Let that be your offering. Your message to the universe. Your signal that you're not waiting anymore, you're welcoming. Before we part, let me thank you from the bottom of my heart. For your presence here. For your willingness to listen deeply. For every like, every share, every beautiful soul who subscribes to this channel and helps grow the Eternal Mindfulness community. You are the reason these messages have a place to land. And your support means the world. So don't rush off just yet. Let this energy stay with you a little longer. Let it settle into your breath, your body, your choices. Come back to this space whenever you need. This isn't a one-time message, it's a rhythm you can return to, again and again. And trust me, Scorpio, what's coming is bigger than what you've left behind. You just have to stay present long enough to meet it. If you found something valuable here, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and hit that subscribe button so you never miss a transmission designed just for you. Until next time, stay rooted, stay open, and most of all, stay aligned. You're not chasing your destiny anymore. You're becoming the field where it arrives.